Welcome, everybody. In this video, I want to talk about a reset of our understanding of the nature of reality. My gosh, this is such a big concept, right? But in order to understand the phenomenon that is the UFO, to understand what is now, of course, called the UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, to understand Bigfoot, to understand the Chupacabra, in order to understand all these phenomenon, we need to have a reset in our basic understanding of what's going on around us. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Now, that's a very famous quote by a Jesuit priest by the name of Teilhard de Chardin. And de Chardin was just this amazing philosopher who had a different view on the nature of our reality. And so in this very short video, I want to start by redefining what's going on so that we can have a better understanding of the phenomenon, right? The UAP, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. So we can have a better idea of what's going on when it comes to things like Bigfoot or to the variety of phenomenon such as the Skinwalker Ranch. What is happening and why is it so difficult for us to get our hands around it? And the reason is we miss the nature of the reality around us. So just as a baseline, if we accept the concept that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, the other side of that coin would then be a discussion about all of the matter in reality, right? And so you may have heard people say before that, right, the stars are having an impact on our life. The planets have an impact on our life. This is the nature of astrology, for example. Right? And this is one of the things when the UFO phenomenon, right? All these beings say, we come from the stars of Orion's belt. What they're describing is they're describing where the conscious elements come from. Yes, I see you. All right, come here. And so when we look at animals, right, we get this profound sense that their consciousness is not the same as our consciousness. And that means that we're dealing with a different kind of consciousness. Now, Tom DeLonge has said very, openly that it really seems like what the phenomenon wants, right? What the devil wants is the devil wants our soul. And that's because if we are spiritual beings, we don't actually die. When we die, we cross over to the spiritual and then reincarnate back for another experience. And as much as I love this little guy right here, they don't experience reincarnation. Their consciousness is hardwired in. It is an affectation of their electrical reality. And when we look at the notion of a spiritual being reincarnating as a human being, then how does the spiritual world and the physical world interact? And the answer then becomes the physical world is having a spiritual experience. And so here's just a simple way to look at that, right? So if you accept the idea that all matter in the universe, acting universally, is a type of consciousness, then at the center of a star, you have what's known as a Z-pinch, which is the flow of electricity going through the star. And at that very center point, you have an exchange between the physical world and the ether. And it is that connection to the ether, which has no space. There is no space between the stars in that area. Then all of the stars themselves act together as a quantum computer, acting through the ether. They are the spiritual representation of the physical universe. And when you look at the oldest copy of the Old Testament, which is called the Septuagint, it's the Greek translation, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, of the Old Testament. The God being in that Bible, in that version of the Old Testament, doesn't define itself as God. It defines itself as the being one, which is to say, it is the summation of all matter in the universe being one being. And when we look at that concept of it being one being, we have to ask ourselves, well, then how does it manifest in our world? It manifests as a spiritual being with all of the characteristics of every living creature on Earth. There have been descriptions of UFOs that look like giant jellyfish. There have been descriptions of beings that look like direwolves. There have been descriptions of beings that look like all sorts of creatures. And that's because the consciousness that would otherwise be described as a jellyfish is taking its spiritual manifestation and it is reappearing in a different form in our physical universe. And it's doing that because although we look at these creatures as having a low level of consciousness, that's their electrical affectation. That is how they see the universe when they are here as a physical creature. But as a spiritual entity, one of the reasons that the UFO phenomenon is so difficult to get our hands around is because it appears with all of the characteristics of every single creature in creation, except us. We are the opposite affectation to them. And so as we experience, as spiritual beings, a physical human experience, all of these creatures who are a physical experience manifest within the spiritual. And that is the other side of the equation to us. And just like that doesn't end, these distinctions go back and forth over and over and over. And each time they do, they represent another layer of reality. Your first layer of reality is the spiritual experiencing the human. The next layer of reality is the physical universe experiencing the spiritual. The next layer of reality is the spiritual experiencing back into the human reality. And it goes around and around and around. How many dimensions of that reality are there? That's a great question. But if you want to know the basics, there's us and there's them. There are good representations of them, and there are very negative representations of them. And that will be the next state of our video. Don't forget to click that like, share, and subscribe button. Peace out. Yeah.